This is going. All right. Rule 1. We've had our introduction, haven't we? And now we are very informed and ready to venture in. I sometimes think that if people could just learn Rule 1, it would be enough. They don't need all 14 rules. Even the first rule, well done, would be sufficient. Okay. So, Rule 1. Hey, Gisela, why don't you read Rule 1 for us?
Within the fire of mind, focused within the head's clear light, let the group stand. The burning ground has done its work. The clear, cold light shines forth. Cold it is, and yet the heat, evoked by the group law, permits the warmth of energetic moving out. Behind the group there stands the door. Before them opens out the way. Together let the band of brothers onward move, out of the fire, into the cold, and toward a newer tension.
All right. Don't you sense there's real ritual potential there? In the old days when we used to do these oratorical rituals, you missed out on that quite a bit. But I really feel that in that last reading, based on that last reading, I would like to revive the rituals for this group so that everybody, gets to read like that. What do you say? Oh, suddenly we have a very busy schedule. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. All right. You know what we should do? Actually, everybody should, tonight, they should go home, wherever home is, and memorize these 5 sentences. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sentences. Would you be willing to try to do that? Or does that sound like a very, very heavy burden? What do you think? I think it would be so valuable, right? All right. Well, we'll test you tomorrow on it. Okay. I mean, what else have you got to do in between times, right? Okay. It will be profitable if we take this Rule 1 sentence by sentence and try to wrest from each sentence its group significance. Kind of interesting, that whole idea. The connection of the word rest with wrestle, to somehow force out of these sentences their true and deeper meaning. So now we just look at the very first sentence that we meditated on this morning. Within the fire of mind, focused within the head's clear light, let the group stand. In this sentence, you have the idea of intellectual perception and of focused unity. So he tries to tell us right here that intellectual perception is not the same as mental understanding. As a matter of fact, the way the Neoplatonists used the word intellectual, it was a far more penetrating state of mind than simply thinking about something, reasoning about something. It was being within a thing and being able to tell all about it. Intel. Intellectual perception is not mental understanding, but is in reality the clear, cold reason. The Buddhic principle in action and the focused sorry, a little drink here. The focused attitude of the spiritual triad in relation to the personality. Intellectual, who were the great Neoplatonist philosophers? Some of you know this, right? Gisela, you know this, don't you?
No.
Well, there was Plotinus, Proclus, and Iamblichus.
No.
Those are the 3, right?
The latter one wrote a book on numbers.
What, Iamblichus did?
I think so.
Interesting. He was a great theurgist, and some have said that he was an earlier incarnation of Master Hilarion, Iamblichus. I don't know about Proclus, but it is said that Plotinus, he wrote a book called the Aeneid, something of that nature, and some have associated him with a Western incarnation of Master DK. And it was in those Neoplatonic books that the word intellect was dignified into its higher meaning as pure reason and intuition. So in a way it kind of makes sense, this continuation of that idea. It's not mental understanding, but in reality the clear, cold reason. The Buddhic principle, which is the wisdom principle, the harmony principle, the love-wisdom principle in action, and the focused attitude of the spiritual triad in relation to the personality, a very detached and understanding, there's the word, because with respect to buddhi, understanding is very pronounced. Now, in what way is this type of perception both clear and cold? How would we address ourselves to that question? In what way is this Buddhic understanding both clear and cold? What do you think? Well, you know, there's a combination of fifth ray and fourth ray. There's a very strong Mercury-Venus thing going on there, of course. But
you mentioned something in meditation this morning.
Yeah, I mentioned something in meditation.
Clear and cold out of the water.
Clear and cold, did you say out of the water?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Well, it's certainly a step above the lower mind, isn't it? Definitely. And the clarity of it, see, what's the difference between reasoning about something and coming to some sort of a deduction or conclusion and just seeing it as it is immediately? There's an unusual clarity in what's called direct perception, isn't there? So there's no question about it could be this, it could be that. It just is. It's clearly presented, right? What does the term cold mean? Because DK has used this term cold in different ways. Clear, cold light, clear, cold reason, not clear, cold reasoning, clear, cold reason. I'm sorry, go ahead, Martha. You've left the lower levels behind. You are cold to the lower levels. You are indifferent to them. You don't care about them. You're not moved by them. You're not attracted by them. Okay, that's one way that it is so, yes.
On the physical plane, I think that clear always has to be in a cold environment because you cannot see anything if it's hot or warm. You cannot be clear because the vibration dizziness.
The air currents, what do you see? Convection sometimes.
Yeah, convection will always be dizzy.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
To be clear in mind, I guess it has to be cold also.
So clarity and coldness go together, you are saying, in perception in the physical environment. As above, so below. Okay, okay. See, you know, we can ask ourselves a question about our normal life. To what, if anything, are we cold at this time? You know the old saying, oh, it leaves me cold. It leaves me cold. You've heard that. People say that, right? So what happens? There's a non-responsiveness, isn't there? You're finished with responsiveness to a certain level of presentation. In other words, people used to be moved by something. You used to be moved by something, and now it leaves you cold. You're no longer responding in your mechanism to the vibrations of that particular level. So that's one way of coldness. Matter of fact, he says there are four things: to will, to know, to dare, and what's the fourth? To will, to know, to dare, and be silent. Okay, the monad wills, the soul knows, the personality dares, and the elemental nature within the personality is silent. So there is a connection here between the coldness and the silence. And because there's no disturbance, you can see in the clarity. When there is a disturbance, And when everything gets heated up, like under Mars, you can't see. You've heard of the statement when people say, what we need here is more light and less heat. You've heard that. In other words, when your astral body gets all stirred up, all heated up, how clearly do you see? No, you become like a hothead, and you don't see. Exactly. You don't see. So there is a condition here with the fifth ray and the second ray where intellectual perception becomes possible. Now, there's another thing. Let's lift the idea of coldness up onto the Buddhic plane itself. We can talk about being cold to things that happen in the lower worlds, but what about the coldness as it might apply to the higher reaches of air, we might say, the Buddhic plane? Any thoughts about coldness on the Buddhic plane? Well, it is cold. It's the clear, cold light, and we're looking for the way coldness applies to the intuition. You see, again, it's a question. Sometimes people seeing from a high mountaintop perspective, they sometimes call it like an Empyrean perspective, very highly elevated and removed. They appear cold.
Clear, cold day.
Yeah, on a clear, cold day. Exactly. And somehow there's such a vision of reality in this undisturbed, unheated atmosphere that you may be judged to be cold with respect to normal human responses. How can the masters be so cold? Why don't they care I'm in such trouble? Why doesn't someone come and save me? All that kind of thing. But what about their perspective in light of what you may be going through compared to your own personal perspective? See, so there is an elevated state of mind which sees so clearly that it just cannot respond to the usual types of magnetism in the lower world. And for that reason, let's just say, because there is coldness to all of those lower things, there is additional clarity. So in other words, there's a statement about seeing all things in the light of the eternal. Have you heard of that? I mean, how does it go in Latin? Sub specie eternitatis or something like that. To see things all in the light of the eternal. So on the Buddhic plane, we enter the eternal now, we're told. The eternal now. And time is collapsed and space is collapsed, and we see all things from a very different perspective, and it is judged to be a cold perspective, even though it can be filled with love. Is that a contradiction? Can it be filled with love and still be cold in this sense? And can you be warm and yet impersonal? These are, the occult paradoxes, so to speak. Someone said to me, nothing can be warmer than the loving impersonality of the Christ. Nothing can be warmer than the loving impersonality of the Christ. So from our human perspective, it seems like these are unbridgeable differences, that you can be cold and yet loving at the same time. That you can be detached and loving at the same time. This is a position of real detachment. Have we at any time in our life achieved this kind of thing, do we think? What do we think? Have we ever been able to step into the view of the eternal long enough to get a completely different perspective on things which is very highly elevated over the usual personal perspective? See, in other words, what we're asking ourselves here is, what is the state of mind of a master of the wisdom? How do they see things? How do they see our little lives? How do they see the personality line? It's very different from what we, down here, involved in the immediate heat of the moment, from what we see. They have really overcome Mars. And Mars is very blinding when it comes to reality. Okay, anyway, a new view of intellectual perception, right? is not mental understanding, A leads to B, therefore C, but it is in reality the clear, cold reason, the things exactly as they are, without any bias at all. It's just how it is. This is truth. This is one of the first levels of real truth. We try to reach truth. We try to demonstrate truth. We try to prove truth. The third ray tries. But do we know truth in the way the Buddhic consciousness knows it? So that would be beyond reasoning and into reason. I know the reason for it all. That is pure reason. The Buddhic principle in action, the focused attitude of the spiritual triad in relation to the personality. How do you look at your personality? Are you personal in the way you look at your personality? What do you think? Well, you know, I know it sounds like a strange question, but you know, there is that attitude. Oh, look what I'm going through. Oh my, you know, oh my, and we have a very personal attitude towards our personality. But we're supposed to have an almost objective, scientific attitude towards the personality, as if it is a more distant object rather than we ourselves. And I'm sure we've had our moments, haven't we? You know the psychosynthesis exercise, right, which is really taken from Raja Yoga. I have, but I am not. I have, but I am not. I have, but I am not. Right? And Roberto Assagioli says, practice this every day. It's the only way to be psychologically healthy in the state of detachment from your instrument. So up on the top of the mountain and almost taking off into the air from the mountain top, we have this detached view of all things as if we are viewing them from an eternal perspective. Do you ever try to sit down with yourself and get into an eternal perspective? You know what I mean? Is it something, you know, like what's real? What's really real here? Who am I and what's real? And, you know, you think yourself into it, or however you arrive there, and the world looks very different from what's happening to me, you know.
Even how high you can get in those moments, I'm still speculating what is manipulating me.
What is manipulating?
All a big manipulation.
Yes, am I being thought? Am I being moved? You know, am I being willed? Am I willing or am I being willed? And so forth. Exactly. Well, you know what it says about the second ray? They're never satisfied. Always there's a higher and higher type of knowledge they pursue. You know, this is here. I'll just go there. This is in Esoteric Psychology 1. It's around. Oops. Oh, I did it again. It's around page 203 here or something. No, that's the wrong book. That's the wrong book. Oh, and if I press this mistakenly, I'm going to lose everything. I pressed the button too fast. Okay, you know, this can happen to people. So anyway, I'll try to go here. And he basically says, you know, overabsorption is study, blah, blah, blah. But here it is. I should probably just finally underline it. Here it is. And this applies to many in this group. The student on this ray is ever unsatisfied with his highest attainments. No matter how great his knowledge, his mind is still fixed on the unknown, the beyond, and on heights as yet unscaled. So maybe some of us can resonate to that particular description of the second ray type. But let's just say that, you know, it's almost like we don't even know what the second ray really is until we are able to focus in the realm of pure reason on the Buddhic plane. It's almost as if at the fourth initiation, it is really revealed to us what the second ray is, uncompromised by the individual perspective, which still exists on the higher mental plane. You know, the causal body is a limitation, isn't it? It's the super individual, isn't it? The causal body is a limitation. For us, it's a great goal, but there comes a time when it is considered to be a limitation. Okay. All right. We go on. So here he he's calling our attention to the following analogies. Let's see if I can get this in kind of the right place. Head, heart, and base of the spine. It's usually throat, isn't it? Monad, soul, and personality. Isn't it interesting to think of the base of the spine associated with the personality? How many petals in the base of the spine center? What elemental is the personality? Is it the first? Is it the second? Is it the third? Is it the fourth? Fourth elemental. Atma, Buddhi, and Manas. Purpose, and the heart is the organ of pure reason, and then spiritual activity. This gives us some high analogies. Spiritual activity, spiritual mentality. This is another definition of higher Manas. How is the heart the organ of pure reason? You know, it seems that you have to somehow unite heart and mind in order to answer that question. How is the heart the organ of pure reason? Of course,
it's related to soul and to consciousness.
It is the what?
It's related to soul and to consciousness.
Related to soul and consciousness. Heart is related to soul and consciousness, pure reason. Okay, what about the dynamics of it? What does the heart, well, heart is soul in a way, isn't it? Heart and soul are the same. Heart is a code word for soul. Soul is a code word for higher consciousness. What does the higher consciousness, the ego on the higher mental plane, the so-called heart of the monad, what does it reveal about life? What does pure reason reveal about life? Gives me time to take a drink. What does pure reason reveal about life? Or, you know, I've thought about this a lot. Here's a hint. One of the names of the second ray, there's a number of names of the second ray, is the ray of the divine pattern. You may remember that. We studied inclusive reason, didn't we? We have studied it. And we've studied pure reason, and there's not really so much difference between them. So when you're looking at the definition of inclusive reason, then you begin to see something of the pure reason that the heart reveals. I feel it should be necessary to go back and take a look at that because it is so important to understand what is pure reason. And the closest we can come to it is this thing about inclusive reason. So let's look at this. Inclusive reason has 4. Second ray inclusive reason. Here it is. If you're a high type on the second ray, you can use the initiatory theme of inclusive reason. So look here in Esoteric Psychology, page 393 and 394, for a definition of inclusive reason which you can use for a deeper understanding of pure reason. Inclusive reason, which is the theme for the initiatory meditation, notice, initiatory, of the second ray disciple, produces, this is what the heart reveals, this is what Buddhi reveals, produces that inherent divine capacity which enables the detail of the sensed whole to be grasped with meticulous entirety. You probably remember this phrase, that inherent divine capacity which enables the detail of the sensed whole to be grasped with meticulous entirety. This is the kind of thing that pure reason reveals. This is what the heart of the monad reveals. So when we talk about what's the difference between spiritual activity, spiritual theorization, spiritual speculation, it's not speculation. Pure reason is seeing it. Inclusive reason is seeing the whole, the detail of the whole, with clarity and without speculation. What happens when you speculate? What do you do? when you think speculatively, what do you do? Because that's not what pure reason is about. What do you do? You Yeah, okay, and you try to guess, don't you? You say, oh, I think my theory is that it could be this way. This is probably, I'm using those, mental words, probably how things are related. I suspect it is like this. I don't know, but I suspect it is like this. That's what you do with the higher mind. You speculate. It's different from seeing, isn't it? It's different. Okay. It's different from grasping how it really is. It's different from straight knowledge. Speculation is not straight knowledge. So when we talk about the one about whom naught may be said, and all the things that the one about whom naught may be said is doing, is it speculation or is it pure reason? What is the one about whom naught may be said doing today? Perhaps. Could be, might be, could be. What is the one about whom naught may be said's page on Facebook? Yes. Short circuit. Okay. So it's that divine capacity. Now think about pure reason here. The divine capacity to see all the detail of the whole and get it all at once and see how every little detail fits with every other little detail and how and what is the divine pattern of the whole thing. This wide yet detailed scope or universal recognition is extremely difficult for me to explain or for you to understand. The second ray has been called the ray of detailed knowledge, and where this term has been employed, the beginner has necessarily laid the emphasis upon the word detail. It might rather be called the ray of detailed unity or the ray of the divine pattern or of beauty in relationship, and it involves on the part of the disciple a high point of synthetic comprehension. So I would suggest when you want to know what is pure reason, that we turn particularly to this paragraph, which at least gives us inclusive reason. It embraces the whole, and yet it sees all of the beautiful patterns of the whole as they are. And that's a whole lot different. It's as if when you step upon the Buddhic plane, your eye opens. On the mental plane, your eye is not yet entirely open. It could be this, could be that, might be, probably. Reason indicates, the evidence tells us that it's what we call mediated knowing. Okay, on the mental plane, mediated knowing. On the Buddhic plane, what then? Would we say unmediated knowing? Unmediated knowing. Does that make sense? You see the reason why I went into that, right? Because it says heart, soul, buddhi, pure reason. Pure reason. We can read the word pure reason for 20 years and it won't mean anything to us. And probably we all have. Just like the people that every time they hear the word spiritual triad, they think of a triangle, We have to get into these terms so that we can relate them to what we know. That's what we got to do. So do you find that when you study Master DK, that this capacity for pure reason, as he describes it, increases? Do you find that it increases this within you? Is the question meaningful, what I've just asked? Because just think of all the things that were not in your universe of thought before you read this hierarchical revelation from Master DK. Just, think, you are carrying within you a universe of thought which is very different from the normal thought forms which humanity entertains. You are seeing things in terms of energies, zodiacal signs, planets, principles, vehicles, planes, subplanes, etc., etc. And all of that is running around in your universe of thought. And not only that, but you have some idea of the relations between these things, don't you? And of the divine pattern that they are making. This is pure reason, as he defines it here. And this is different, of course, isn't it, Gisela, from a critique of pure reason in the third-ray Kantian sense. Because there he's not dealing with the intuition per se. He's dealing with the reasoning processes of the mind. You understand it more than I do, but that's what I've gathered from it.
He gives very good arguments for why time and space are the forms of intuition.
So why time and space are the
Forms
of intuition. What does he call them?
Forms that intuition works through.
Okay, forms that intuition works through. Doesn't he call them categories of or categories of mind, or categories of consciousness? In other words, the time and space are modes of perception.
The forms that intuition works through.
So that's okay. Well, sometime we'll have, it'd be great to have you give a presentation in class on this sort of Kantian understanding in relation to occultism, which is just what your thesis, one of the things your thesis has focused on. It will be interesting some night after not having eaten too heavily. Don't you think? Okay, yes.
What you're saying is that intuition is working through forms. Is that what you're saying?
She's saying, is intuition working through forms? Forms. You're saying the time and space are forms themselves through which intuition works. They are categories. Well, I recall somehow, I recall this idea of that time and space are not realities. They are what consciousness perceives of reality due to the structure of our mind or our brain. This is how I have understood it. In other words, that we perceive time and space because of the perceiving mechanism that we have, and not because they are real in the sense that what they look like is what they are. The thing in itself is a different thing altogether. Anyway, we have these analogies, and what is interesting here is that the base of the spine is the one thing that seems to be out of correspondence. Normally you would think head, heart, and throat, wouldn't you? But in this particular case, he's giving it to us as if it is the foundation. And Manas, in a way, is the foundation of the spiritual triad, and so is spiritual activity, and personality is what's called the third of the periodical vehicles, right? There are three periodical vehicles: monad, soul, and personality. Why are they called periodical vehicles? Periodical. Well, even the monad, which is interesting because you normally think, well, personalities come and go periodically. Even soul incarnations come and go periodically. What about the monad? Is it forever? See, maybe not. The monad, too, has its own periodicity related to every solar system, and one day what we call the monad no longer exists. So if a thing begins and a thing ends, it is periodical. And what we call the monad begins and ends. The essence of the monad never begins or ends. All right. So, we're also told an interesting thing about the sun, that in a way it represents the base of the spine center of the solar logos. I find that very interesting because in a way it looks like the physical vehicle of the solar logos. But DK has connected it with the base of the spine center. And certainly it is a great principle of pranic vitality. Okay, I'll give you a little test. If the highest head center is associated with the plane of Atma, with what plane is the base of the spine center associated? If the heart center is associated with Buddhi, the solar plexus with what? Throat center with what? Base of spine center with what? Different claims, different centers. Base of spine center associated with what claim? Well, okay, it keeps on going down, doesn't it? And the interesting thing about this is that the base of the spine center, right around page 170 of Cosmic Fire, is associated with the etheric plane, with the four ethers, with vitality. And the interesting thing is there's a reversal. The sacral center is associated with what? In comparison. See, base of the spine center is higher than the sacral center. I mean, it's lower than the sacral center, right? But there's a reversal. And the sacral center generates what? Dense physical bodies. In a way, the sacral center is the home of the mental elemental. That is one of its purposes. But in another way, it is not considered a center with which the white magician has to deal, because it's directly related to the dense physical body. Now, this is a little synthesis work here. Take a look at the 5 non-sacred planets, of which the sun and the moon are considered to be. What does the moon represent? In other words, it goes sun, Pluto, Mars, Earth, Moon. What does the moon represent? Those are the 5 non-sacred planets. The moon represents, in the nature of man, what? Well, in a way, the moon does represent all levels, of course. And it has a lot to do with emotionality. But specifically in this context, the moon represents the dense physical body, which is not a principle. So you see what I'm saying? Sacral center, physicality, sacral center, the generation of forms, and the moon, and black magic, they all go together. Those are the things that go together. And I've sometimes said this, but when you want to know what is pure reason, one of the easy ways to work at pure reason is to figure out what goes together. See, in other words, I just made some correspondences here. That the sacral center is associated with the dense physical body, so is the moon. Sacral, moon, dense physical body. These factors are related within the pattern that pure reason reveals. So if you want to start pure reasoning, purely reasonable thinking, find associations. This is a mercurial task. Use Mercury to find the links between things and how these constellations of things fit together. That's one of the ways of generating pure reason in yourself. Does that make sense? Now, you have a lot of correspondences in your mind, don't you, from all of your studies? You know, if I say to you, Jupiter, what chakra does it represent? Heart. Okay, can I draw a line somehow to Pisces in doing that? And what ray comes through Pisces? And 2. See what I mean? You see those relations, those connections? So much about learning how to think in terms of pure reason is finding the links between things through number and function. This is very important if we're going to step into what Master DK is revealing to us. See, and pretty soon, click, 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 you've got a whole constellation of related things which are making a pattern. And the pattern is related to the ray of the divine pattern. So that's how the second ray is working with the help of Mercury. All right, in these words, he says, you have therefore the position of the personality indicated as it stands at the penetrating point of the Antakarana, as it contacts the manas or lower mind, and is thus the agent of the purpose of the monad, working through the spiritual triad, which is, as you know, related to the personality by the Antakarana. Okay, is this a meaningless sentence? Hopefully not. what is the penetrating point of the Antakarana? Let's get our map here. What is the penetrating point of the Antakarana? The personality as it stands at the penetrating point of the Antakarana. Where do we really begin to build the Antakarana? Where?
The highest level I-
Right
There.
there. You are here. Okay. So this is the penetrating point of the Antakarana. How is it that the personality stands there? Does the personality stand there? It's as if saying, isn't it, that the place where the personality is really organized and becomes an integrated personality is on the fourth subplane of the mental plane. Isn't it saying that? So the personality is the instrument of the monad, and it has to connect directly with the monad. And when the monad connects with the mental unit, that connection has occurred. And when we are building the Antakarana with our techniques of intention, visualization, projection, and so forth, we are connecting, ultimately, the monad and the personality, aren't we? Now, some of you have done the Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 3, Volume 2 meditations, correct? Maybe we should open up the window just a little bit. Is that possible? I'm being suffocated by my own hot air. Okay. That third meditation links the personality directly with the monad. Okay. So in these words, you have therefore the position of the personality indicated as it stands at the penetrating point of the Antakarana, as it contacts, the Antakarana contacts the manas or lower mind, and is thus the agent of the purpose of the monad working down through the spiritual triad, which, as you know, is related to the personality via the Antakarana. So these correspondences give us the link-up that we are supposed to create. Well, okay. This is very technical language, I admit. But what is the purpose behind this language? The planetary logos has a purpose. The monad knows that purpose. The monad sends that purpose down through the spiritual triad. We, the disciple, are standing here in the mind. There is a technique by which we, via the bridge of light, can connect with the purpose which the monad is sending to us. And what happens when we do that? What happens when we connect with purpose? What is your experience when you connect with purpose? What happens to your life? What do you say? Oh, just another purposeful day. Do you not feel electrified, galvanized, stimulated, driven, directed, swept, move forward? It is a special feeling of vitalization from on high, isn't it? You know, when people led a meaningless life, you've heard of Viktor Frankl and logotherapy? Logotherapy? This is the psychological therapy of meaning. And he went through the concentration camp experience and he said, well, who survived? The people who survived are those who had the deepest sense of meaning about their life. This was his observation. So many people, you know, they get nihilistic, suicidal, life is meaningless, meaningless. When they say that, it tells you that there has not been even the first part of the Antakarana built. They may be brilliant in a lower mental way, but they have not connected with the world of meaning. Where is the world of meaning found? Where is the world of significance found? Where is the world of being found? Where is the world of causes found? Here is the world of meaning. Right there. The higher mental plane. Here is the world of significance. This is the spiritual triad revealing the relationship of anything to the will, love, and mind of the planetary logos. Here is what? The world of being. This is monadic being, the world of being, monadic plane. And then he tells us this, this may be called the causal body, but the true world of causes is here.
And that's the same as truth?
Well, okay, is it the same as truth? What is truth? Truth is a relative term which describes that which is revealed to progressively more elevated consciousnesses. So the truth is the clearest perception of a particular consciousness. And when there is and let's call it like this, that we have one in whom we live and move and have our being. And who was that we described earlier today? The one in whom we live and move and have our being? Solar Logos. If we ever slip into the perception of the Solar Logos through the process of continually elevated incarnations, we perceive the truth of the largest ring past knot to which we can practically relate. But is it the truth? It's relative, isn't it? Because are there not higher perceptions of higher beings? The clearest possible perception of a still higher being is a still higher truth. So, whoops, something happened here.
It depends on the level from which you are looking.
Exactly. It depends exactly on the level from which you are looking. I just want to make sure that all staff make sure you keep yourself either on mute or make sure there's no background noise. So the truth is a relative term. Let's look at universal truth, or what we might call ultimate truth. How many beings are there in cosmos? Okay, we want to start with an easy question. Obviously the answer is one. Okay, in a way, the answer is one. And we can call that being, whatever we want to call it, God or whatever, or I like to use the term universal logos. I like to think that, on the United States dollar bill, when there's a pyramid and an eye going through the top of that pyramid, then we call that the all-seeing eye. I like to think of the consciousness of the universal logos as the all-seeing eye with respect to this universe. So, whatever the perception is that is perceived by the universal logos is, to me, the ultimate cosmic truth. But is that the truth? Really? Because are there not other universal logi and so forth? So you know what I'm getting at. Truth is a relative term, and when the universe disappears, does truth disappear? When the universal logos is absorbed into the absolute deity, does truth disappear? So you know what I'm saying, that the ultimate truth cannot even be found inside a universe. I'm saying that the ultimate truth can only be realized when God is all in all, like Blavatsky describes. The Eternal Mother slept and awoke and then slept again and so forth. This is giving the law of periodicity. And when the Eternal Mother sleeps, I would say that ultimate truth exists. And when this little specialization of infinity that we call a universe appears, then ultimate truth no longer exists. But right down here on our own level, it has to do with how we perceive things and then how we represent the things we perceive. We perceive things in a certain way. And what if what we say to others is different from how we really perceive things? Are we telling the truth? Obviously not, right? So it has to do with the perception of any consciousness. The best perception of any consciousness is the truth for that sphere of consciousness. So anyway, DK says here, these are high matters, but we have to get used to thinking in these terms, and we can do that. The heart, as an aspect of pure reason, requires careful consideration. What does he mean by that? Does he mean the physical heart? Does he mean the heart center? Does he mean the consciousness which is associated with the open heart center? And what consciousness is that is associated with the open heart center? Christ consciousness and, in general, buddhi. Heart, buddhi, pure reason. These things go together. What happens when the causal body disappears? Does the heart center of the monad disappear? Cannot, right? Cannot disappear. But what happens is that the spiritual triad itself becomes the true ego, like the heart center of the monad. And that's when we really have Christ consciousness and buddhi. Okay, so we've been talking about here in our own rambling way what DK is now saying. The heart, as an aspect of pure reason, requires careful consideration. Now look, when you want to think about truth, do you think it will that it will suffice if you use your reasoning mind alone? Or should your heart center be engaged when you're thinking about deeper truth? What do you think? Yeah, so you have an experience of this, don't you? That when deeper truths have dawned upon you, that there's a feeling that the heart center is engaged. Why does DK say this interesting thing? Very simple. He says, love reveals. Isn't that interesting? Very simple. But think about that. The people who really love are the ones who receive the light. Why should that be? You know, we say love is blind, so how do you receive the light? Is love blind or is desire blind? I think his desire is blind, you know. Maybe love is revealing.
Maybe it's not blind, but it's not judging.
It's not judging. You say love is not judging.
Yeah. It's not blind, but it's not judging.
Okay, love is not blind, but also it's not judging. I think that love reveals the archetypal structure of our world. That if you want to get in touch with the divine patterns, love is the way to reveal the divine patterns. Somehow they make themselves known to the person who loves. It's like this. You know, when you criticize a person, can you really see that person? And then what happens? If the person that you've been criticizing, you begin to love that person, do you see more or less? What do you think? Obviously, I'm setting up the question, you know what I mean? But the whole idea is I can criticize, you know, and I see this and I see that. Is that real seeing of the person? Because love and the heart reveal a deeper aspect of the person, don't they? They are sensitive to a new form of light about that individual, aren't they? And thus it goes with the whole cosmos. So the heart center reveals a deeper layer of light, which is hidden behind the form. I'm just trying to get at this in various ways. Is that your experience, that when you love someone, you see more? I think so. I think it is so. I mean, and this is different again from desire, right? is not the same thing as if I desire this person, I see more. No, maybe desire is blind, maybe.
Love is not the sentiment. It's not a feeling.
Love is not a feeling. Yes, it's not an astral response. Although sometimes in Agni Yoga, Master Moria uses the idea of the feeling of the heart. There he means the sentiency of the heart, the sensitivity of the heart. But it's not a I like you, I don't like you. That's what feelings are all about. I'm attracted, I'm not attracted, you know. These are deep matters. The heart as an aspect of pure reason requires careful consideration. It is usually considered the organ of pure love. Okay, fine. But from the angle of the esoteric sciences, and then he says this thing, love and reason are synonymous terms. And that's what I've been trying to help us get at. That love reveals the divine patterns which are eminently reasonable in line with the ideation of the Creator. The Creator has created certain beautiful archetypes. They hang out there in the world of being, and they direct everything. And love reveals the true divine pattern of the archetypes. And until we love, we only see what we think we see. In other words, we don't see the real thing at all. So Christ for us is the greatest example of divine love, right? In the human race, especially earth humanity, right? So what does it say about Christ? He knows you immediately, right? It says he knew what was in man. Did he have to think about it? It says, this particular psychological theory tells me that this is how you probably are, So the woman of, the woman at the well? Samaria, the woman of Samaria or something? She walks up to the well and Christ tells her about her last 5 husbands or something, something like this. An instantaneous knowledge. And this is because of the divine love. It reveals a layer of understanding that nothing else can do. So he says, if you really want to know, then you have to love. And this is very interesting. Love and reason are synonymous terms, not love and reasoning. The reason for being. Love revealing the reason for being. My own idea here. And I would have you reflect upon why this should be so. Why this should be so. That love and reason are synonymous terms. I say here something to this nature. Pure reason induces love. The study of the rays, we see people through the rays. It's the whole idea of appreciating and loving the divine pattern which is revealed to us. Love is essentially a word for the underlying motive of creation. What does that mean to us? Love is essentially a word for the underlying motive of creation. Who's the creator? Who's the becomer? Let's say it's our planetary logos. Let's say it's our solar logos. I like to think of it this way. God so loved the world, that's standard, right? That he gave his own blah, 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 right? God so loved the world that he became the world. Or God so loved his own ideation of a possible world that he became that ideation. See, so it's God becoming creation, not God just creating. We have the division, don't we? Here's the creator and what he created. The hand of God moved and created this. But a more sophisticated way of looking at it is God became his creation. God's becoming is creation. And this is, in a way, pantheism, isn't it? Pantheism, God everywhere, God in all things, pantheism. Okay, love is essentially a word for the underlying motive of creation. Now, what about when you create? You as a creator. So let's look for the parallel. Is love the underlying motive for that which you create? Or should it be? Should be. Should be. Right. We create for many reasons, don't we? We create. But just imagine we could be in that state of mind where our love of God, our love of the divine plan is so strong that whatever it is we decide we're going to imagine and manifest and all that is all based upon our motive to express that love that we feel. That's a high state, isn't it? It would mean that the buddhi was really in us, wouldn't it? Okay. Well, this is all going to relate to the rule here. This is not an easy subject because usually we put mind over here and we put love over here. And here's this pure reason thing, which on the Buddhic plane seems to have elements of both, doesn't it? Love is pure reason, but pure reason is also the revelation of the divine pattern and divine intelligence. So these two things come together. Is it reasonable, I ask, that things come together on the Buddhic plane? What do you think? Why should they come together on the Buddhic plane? Why should things that were apart come together on the Buddhic plane? It's the middle plane, indeed, so that immediately involves the fourth ray and the mixing and the blending. And it's also called by an interesting name. It's called the plane of, and it begins with an H, at least in English, the plane of, well, humanity, you know, you're actually right about that because that is where the human monad is supposed to express. But I was looking for the word harmony. It's the plane of harmonization. But then humanity and harmonization go together because that's actually what humanity is supposed to do. It's supposed to be able to harmonize the higher and the lower worlds. We're not there yet. We're still fighting, you know. But humanity is meant to be the great harmonizer. So love, the underlying motive the underlying motive for creation. And what that means is there's such an identification with the divine pattern in all of its beauty that we seek to reproduce the divine pattern in every aspect of our life, no matter how small, you know, the circumstance might be. We seek to reproduce the divine pattern. Motive, however, presupposes purpose leading to action, and hence, in the group life task of the incarnating monad, that's interesting phrasing, in the group life task of the incarnating monad, there comes a time when motive, heart, and soul become spiritually obsolete because purpose has reached a point of fulfillment and the activity set in motion is such that purpose cannot be arrested or stopped. What does this mean to us? Motive and heart and soul become spiritually obsolete. In other words, it's not just about love and unity anymore, is it? Something else has taken over. And what is that? We call it purpose. We call it purpose. What center is purpose connected with particularly? Your solar plexus? What do you think? Ask the average person. I feel my soul, you know, whatever. I feel something here. Head center. Purpose is the head center. Will is the base of the spine center. So what really is purpose that it should take over when motive, heart, and soul become spiritually obsolete? Because love wants to unify all things that are present in the field. But purpose appreciates the exact form that those things should take. Purpose comes from the first ray. So when purpose is enacted, sometimes it may seem that love is set aside. You know how all the ray lords talk to the first ray lord? Do you remember that? It's like, please, Lord, not yet. You know, it's like that. Let me do my thing, and then you can come in and destroy everything, okay? Because in the realm of purpose, there is a divine design. Divine design, which is perfection itself in any system. And love may say, oh, well, we've got what we've got, so let everybody love one another, and let's all be harmoniously related, buddhi, and so forth. And then purpose comes in and says, well, wait a second. These relationships may be very loving, but they're not archetypal. See what I'm saying? Yes, Anna.
Purpose for me is also.
Purpose for me is also.
Word from the monad.
It's also is what from the monad?
Yeah, it's a word.
Word from the monad. Purpose. Yes, yes, exactly. And let me just relate that to what I am trying to say here. The monad is found on this level. And this is also the world of the archetypes right here on the second level. So purpose is a design created by a special sound in the world of the archetypes, which we call the world of being. The world of being is where our monad hangs out, where we hang out when we are the monad, and we are part of 7 great circles. 7 great circles in the world of being. And every circle, 7 great monadic groups, has its own particular design, geometry, sound, perfect thought, perfect relation. And it's the design of our particular circle that our monad is trying to express. So way down deep in us, there is a geometry coming from the second plane right here. And that geometry is what is so deep in us that our real inner name is an aspect of that geometry. And somehow, even unconsciously, life after life, we are working at trying to express what that is until we finally wake up to it and see what it is. So I agree, purpose and monad go together. But so does divine design go with purpose and monad. And there's one higher level, and this is the level of the liberated monad, where the Christ and the Buddha are now found, and the 7 have become the 3. So suffice it to say, each one of us, built into us, has a divine purpose, and we don't know it yet. When I say to you, what's your soul purpose? Well, okay. You'll tell me something about this particular incarnation, won't you? Will you tell me something about the next several incarnations? Maybe. But it's in the short term. But what is the larger overall divine design which all of these incarnations have been expressing? What is your place in the sacred geometry? And we don't know that yet, do we? But we get a glimpse of what it might be. When you follow your deepest heart's desire, what is your deepest heart's desire? It's leading you to finding your place in the divine geometry. That's what's happening. Does this make sense, or is it too abstract? Or do you want to eat, or what? All right. Yes, Anne. Yes.
So if the monad has the purpose,
If the monad has a purpose,
the soul has the plan,
the soul has a plan.
and that is God.
You can say something of that nature. Let's just say the soul has a reduced purpose that is given to it by the monad, and the soul on the higher mental plane is thinking how an aspect of that purpose can be worked out here and now in this incarnation. And you know, what are we trying to do in this study? Really, we're trying to put all the different parts of ourselves together, aren't we? Parts of ourselves that we didn't even suspect existed before we are reading these clear, occultly scientific presentations. We said, oh, you know, there's something deeper in me. Okay, fine. But along comes this fantastic science and tells us just what it is and how it all works. So, you know, we have to be very grateful to Master DK and KH and Moria behind them all when they said, okay, look, we want to bring the ageless wisdom closer to humanity. And some of the members of the hierarchy says, no, they're not ready for it. But then Sanat Kumara said, okay, boys, Give it a shot. Give it a try. You can do that. And people like ourselves have benefited because of that. Just think where our thought process might be if we didn't have the ageless wisdom, where it might be. We might just be circling in our minds with many more material-minded philosophers, and so, well, what is life really all about? Speculate, whatever. And here we have the divine science laid out for us in such a clear fashion. Okay, so anyway, at a certain point, it's not just about harmonizing things. It's not just about seeing the unity of things. It is purposeful, and the divine idea has to be worked out, even if it causes some friction. You know what DK said? When a higher disciple steps into the life of an aspirant, the aspirant's life turns upside down. When a master steps into the life of a disciple, there is a horrible confusion. He uses other words, but it's that kind of thing. He says the personality of the disciple finds it appalling. That's the word he uses, appalling, which means shocking in a negative sense, when a master steps in to the life of a disciple. The soul finds it a passing disturbance, okay, but the personality of the disciple is shocked at what that higher energy actually will do to his normal personality tradition. All of us have a personality tradition. We do it this way, and we've done it that way forever, and we're going to keep on doing it that way. And then the master says, would you like to apply to my group? Sure, fill out your application, join Master DK's group, and watch your life fall apart. See, that's how it was for so many of those disciples. And, they say, people say like this, they failed. Well, just think what it would be like to have your life under the constant scrutiny of the master. The eye is always upon you. Well, not watching whether you brush your teeth or not, but it's always upon you there. And he has this form. He has a form, right? What's it called? What are those forms called? They build them in astral-mental matter. And I forget what they're called. You know what it is. It's not the Maya Varupa. It's like a talisman of some kind. There's a name for it. Anyway, it's an image of you. And whatever changes in you, the form changes. So the master just looks at the form and sees how you're doing. It's very simple. Elsbeth did. What? I'm sorry. What did she do? She tried. Alice Bailey tried to live a normal life. Alice Bailey tried to act normal. Yes, she did. As a matter of fact, she was so concerned with acting like, I'm just like you, that actually DK criticized her for that, because he said that she was not really living according to her true spiritual status. She didn't want to be singled out as different. She says, I'm just a perfectly normal British woman. Okay. Yeah, she was kind of a perfectly normal British woman on one level, perhaps. But her internal telepathic capacity, cultivated over many lives with DK, was extraordinary. So she just didn't want to have people, looking up to her and all that kind of thing. But he says, you have to live according to your spiritual status, which doesn't mean you pretend and posture, but you have to live from that point of view.
But you could say that there must have been a meaning, a purpose.
There must have been a meaning or purpose for her being where she was. Well, she had karma to fulfill, for one thing. She had the English language to master, which turns out to be our universal language at this time. Why did HPB write in English, for heaven's sake? And here comes Alice Bailey, who has the superb command of the English language. And here is Master DK, who among the Eastern masters knows the most English. So they collaborated for the sake of Geminian, both of them Gemini in a way, communication. So there must have been a purpose for her being placed as she was placed, absolutely. Well, look, right now we kind of see through a glass darkly, but wouldn't it be nice to know where we came from, where we're going, and all the developments which have occurred? Yes?
Yeah, just one thing I
Funny
read,
thing, teacher read.
Foster, yeah, Foster Bailey,
Foster Bailey.
he said it was kind of shocking because he said that he was
He said
driving around with Alice Bailey.
he was driving
and she
around
was
Alice
so
Bailey.
tired because he was always on tour and speaking. And he said, and this was meeting with these very, very nice people that they were spiritually done.
Oh, spiritually dumb. They were. In other words, he was driving around with Alice Bailey a lot, and he was getting very, very tired because
She was so tired.
she was so tired.
And
She was meeting these spiritually dumb people,
that she spent
so much time with them, and they were draining her energy. They were draining her energy. This is a second-rate disease, You're so nice to people, you're just talking to them, and you just that they were so spiritually dumb. Well, Foster Bailey had a way of saying things, I understand. He, being on the first ray, he had a second-rate personality, but he had a way of saying things, that is. So when Alice Bailey died, DK wrote a letter to him, basically said, will you please be nicer? It was, not, he didn't say that, but he just said that the people at headquarters, the people in the group are going to miss the teaching nonsense of Alice Bailey. Because she was on the second ray and she was Gemini, so she has a sense of humor, and she could say these crazy things which were somehow conveying the teaching. And Foster was very, he was right down the line. So he being on the first ray, and then, I suppose when he took over, my understanding is that the complexion of the arcane school changed its array somewhat. It became more a first ray organization, perhaps. And people have, wondered whether it should or not, and so forth. Mary Bailey came in; she was a wonderful lady. But she was first ray soul too. She used to say, "My rays are just the same as Foster's." Okay. So she, they were, a couple on the same ray from that point of view. Ray 1 soul, ray 2 personality, ray 4 mind, ray 2 astral body, ray 7 physical body. Those were the rays of those two people who had that kind of congruency. But still, the first ray was there. Matter of fact, in those old days, the arcane school split apart on the basis of the first ray and the second ray. So when they went to build up the school for esoteric studies, which still exists, by the way, in Asheville, North Carolina, run by some very fine people, it was more along the line of the second ray. Sometimes it's hard to get the second ray and the first ray to work together. But because Alice Bailey had a second ray soul, a first ray personality, and a first ray mind, and she was in the center of the whole thing, she could hold that together. She could hold the second ray and the first ray together. But later it became more difficult, When the authority dies, people go back to their own preferences, and they tend not to be unifying, but to split apart. I just want to read just a little more, then we have to eat. Okay. All right. We will live to eat again. I'm sure this is... Well, what does he say? Master Moria says this nice thing. He says, food is the chains of the devil. Okay, that's kind of, he also says comfort is the cemetery of the spirit. So, which do you prefer? Okay, so anyway, purpose is manifesting here. That purpose cannot be stopped. That's the thing about the will. It's not just love. It corrects love and makes love correspond to purpose. The disciple cannot then be deterred, and no hindrance or difficulty is hard enough to prevent his moving forward. What do you think? Does this apply to you?
No.
Well, what would it take for it to apply? The disciple then cannot be deterred, and no hindrance or difficulty is hard enough to prevent his moving forward when purpose grips you. When you're hit on the head by the head center, then you cannot be deterred. What do you think it would take? It is about a sense of values, isn't it? It's about what you really desire, isn't it? Okay, wait a second. I'm hearing voices. Is this the voice of God? Voice of God, anyone? No, it's not the voice of God. It may be my wife. Wait a second. She's here. Hi, dear. Okay. That's like the voice of God. Okay. All right. Then we have eventual destruction of what theosophists call the causal body and the establishing of a direct relation between the monad and its tangible expression upon the physical plane. Now, this is what Meditation 3 tries to give us. At least it lines us up there in Dhyana 2. Direct relation between the monad and its tangible expression upon the physical plane. I'm going to ask you what you would be like if you were like this, okay? The head center and the center at the base of the spine, which he gave us in that table, will be in direct, unimpeded relation. Monadic will and personality will likewise be in a similar, unimpeded relation via the antikarana, and I would have you remember that the will aspect is the final dominating, it's a Leo word, dominating principle. So this is what he's trying to create in us, that the spiritual will become the dominant factor, the top of the head, the base of the spine will be put together, monadic will and personal will be put together. What would we be like if we were like that? You know, somewhere I have a quote. What would, you know, does this really, obviously, this doesn't really characterize us quite yet, does it? Perhaps not. This undeterrable, undeflectable, invincible, will-dominated individual, regardless of what our ray may be, the divine plan, the divine purpose is everything. Our personal life is nothing except as it serves the divine plan and purpose. This is what we are moving towards. And, you know, at first it takes your breath away and say, well, how can I do that? I'll lose this, I'll lose this, I'll lose this. Who's the I that's losing what? See, the material in this book is breathtaking. It's meant to make us all the servants of the divine will. And our personal life doesn't mean a whole lot with respect to what's being taught in this book. Now, are those good thoughts to take with you to lunch? All right. I imagine the schedule is such that at 12:30 we have to eat. Is that correct? Martha? Do we have to eat at 12:30? We're forced to eat at 12:30. Yes. Correct? Yes. They'll come for us. Won't they come for us? They'll knock at the door. And they'll say, where are you? Okay. All right. It is exactly 12:30 now. So let us take an hour and 15 minutes for lunch or so, okay? And we'll come back at 1:45, and we'll start in the second part of the book, maybe. 1:45, or maybe not. because there are certain things here about being on fire with the will of the monad, which I know will help your digestion. Okay. All right. Peace. We'll see you later. Enjoy your lunch. Okay, friends. Those of you who are with us, I have 21 of us here. I don't know what time it is. Brett, Kay, and Tuya is here, and I'm here apparently. And there are 16 of us. Andrew, Carol, Catherine DeVerne, hi. Celeste, Eleanor, Gary, Hogney, Jeanette, Joe, Johanna, Leah, Leslie, Linda, and SR. Okay, sorry. Not sure who SR may be, but hello, SR. All right, we'll be back at just about 1:45, and I'll leave a message to that effect. Back at 1:45. Okay, let's see. Somewhere. I'll do this. Okay. We'll return at 1:45 Danish time. Nice to time. This is 11 12:45 a.m. GMT. Thereabouts, maybe 5 minutes late or whatever, something like that, we will return. Okay? Lots to think about. Talk to you soon. I'm just going to turn a few things off here.